Book 4, Prose 1. Philosophy told the story of Orpheus softly and slowly with her customary dignity. When she had finished and seemed about to continue her discourse, I broke in, still depressed by my personal grief. O guide to true light, all that you have so far told me is divine in itself and perfectly convincing by virtue of your argument. But, although the sorrow caused by my misfortunes had made me forget these truths, I had not always been ignorant of them. Here, though, is the greatest cause of my sadness. Since there is a good governor of all things, how can there be evil? And how can it go unpunished? Think how astonishing this is, but it is even more amazing that with wickedness in full control, virtue not only goes unrewarded, but is trampled underfoot by the wicked and is punished instead of vice. That this can happen in the realm of an all-knowing and all-powerful God who desires only good must be a cause of surprise and sorrow to everyone. Philosophy answered, it would indeed be a monstrous thing, and astonishing to everyone if, as you suppose, in the well-ordered house of so great a father, the vilest objects were cherished, and the most precious were regarded with contempt. But this is not the case, for if our previous conclusions are valid, and with the help of him whose kingdom we are now speaking of, you will discover that the good are always powerful, and the evil always weak and futile, that vice never goes unpunished, nor virtue unrewarded, that the good prosper and the evil suffer misfortune, and much else which will remove the causes of your complaint and strengthen your convictions. And since under my guidance you have understood the essence of true happiness and have found out where it resides, I shall now run through the steps in my explanation, which I think necessary, and show you the path which will take you home. And I shall give wings to your mind which can carry you aloft, so that without further anxiety you may return safely to your own country under my protection, along my path, and by my means. Poem 1. The wings are swift, able to soar beyond the heavens. The quick mind which wears them scorns that hateful earth and climbs above the globe of the immense sky, leaving the clouds below. It soars beyond the point of fire caused by the swift motion of the upper air until it reaches the house of stars. There it joins Phoebus in his path, or rides with cold old Saturn, companion of that flashing sphere, running along the starry circle where sparkling night is made. When it has seen enough, it flies beyond the farthest sphere to mount the top of the swift heaven and share the holy light. There the Lord of Kings holds his scepter, governing the reins of the world. With sure control he drives the swift chariot, the shining judge of all things. If the road which you have forgotten but now search for brings you here, you will cry out, this I remember, this my own country, here I was born, and here I shall hold my place. Then if you wish to look down upon the night of earthly things which you have left, you will see those much feared tyrants dwelling in exile there. Prose 2. Hearing this, I said, what wonderful things you promise, and I have no doubt that you can do them, but do not hold me in suspense, now that you have got me so eager. First, Philosophy answered, you will agree that the good have always power and the wicked do not. Each of the propositions proves the other, for since good and evil are contraries, if good is shown to be powerful, the weakness of evil necessarily follows. Conversely, if evil is shown to be weak, the strength of good is clear. But in order to demonstrate this truth fully, I will prove my point in both ways, one after the other. The success of any human action depends on two things, will and power. If either is lacking, nothing can be done. If the will is absent, nothing is attempted. If power is lacking, the will is frustrated. Therefore, if you find someone wanting something and not getting it, you must conclude that he is without the power to obtain what he wants. That is quite clear, I said, and no one can deny it. On the other hand, you will agree that the man who gets what he wants had the power to get it. That is equally clear. Moreover, what a man can do, he has the power to do, but what he cannot do shows lack of power. That is true, I agreed. Then, do you recall that earlier in our discussion we found that every intention of the human will is directed toward happiness, however various its inclinations may be? I remember that to have been proved. And do you also recall that happiness is the good, so that everyone who seeks happiness also desires the good? I have not forgotten, I said. Indeed, I hold it fast in my memory. Therefore, all men, good and bad, have the same purpose in striving to obtain the good. That follows, I agreed. But it is also true that men become good by obtaining the good. Yes. So good men obtain what they desire. That seems to be true. But evil men would not be evil if they obtained the good they seek. That is true. Therefore, since both seek the good, but good men obtain it, and evil men do not, it follows that good men have power, but evil men are impotent. To doubt that would be to disregard the nature of things and the force of argument. Next, philosophy continued, suppose that there are two persons to whom the same natural function is assigned. One of them accomplishes the action by natural means, but the other is unable to do so and uses unnatural means. Not indeed to accomplish the action, but to pretend to do so. Which of these two would you consider the more powerful? I think I see what you're driving at, but please explain more fully. Well, you will agree that the act of walking is natural for men, and that the feet are natural means of accomplishing the action. Quite so. Then if one man is able to walk on his feet, and another, who is deprived of this natural capability, tries to walk by crawling on his hands, which of the two might rightly be thought the stronger? That goes without saying, I answered, for everyone knows that the man who cannot use his natural capacities is stronger than the one who cannot. Well then, she continued, the highest good is proposed equally to good and bad men. Good men seek it by the natural means of the virtues. Evil men, however, try to achieve the same goal by a variety of concupiscences. And that is surely an unnatural way of seeking the good, don't you agree? I do indeed, and I see clearly the consequence of your line of reasoning, for it follows that the good are powerful and the wicked are impotent. Your deduction is correct and indicates to your physician an improving state of health and resistance. But since I see that you are so quick to understand, I will condense my demonstration. Consider how great is the weakness of vicious men who are unable to achieve the goal toward which the nature leads, even forces them. What would happen if they were deprived of this great and nearly irresistible natural tendency? Think how grave is this impotence of wicked men. For the goal which they are pursuing is not a trivial or frivolous thing. They fail in the race for the very summit of all things. They fail miserably to achieve even the things for which they struggle night and day. And just here the powers of good men are clearly seen. For, as you would consider an effective walker, one who could go on foot as far as it is possible to go, so you must consider him to be the most powerful who achieves the goal of all human desires, the good beyond which there is nothing. An obvious conclusion follows from this. The wicked are wholly deprived of strength. For why do they neglect virtue and pursue vice? Is it because they are ignorant of the good? Well, what greater weakness is there than blindness of ignorance? Or do they know what they should seek but are driven astray by lust? If so, they are made weak by intemperance and cannot overcome their vices. Or do they knowingly and willfully desert the good and turn to vice? Anyone acting that way loses not only his strength, but his very being, since to forsake the common goal of all existence is to forsake existence itself. Perhaps it may strike some as strange to say that evil men do not exist, especially since they are so numerous, but it is not so strange. For I do not deny that those who are evil, but I do deny that they are, in the pure and simple sense of the term. For just as you may call a cadaver a dead man, but cannot call it simply a man, so I would concede that vicious men are evil, but I cannot say in any absolute sense that they exist. For a thing is which maintains its place in nature and acts in accord with its nature. Whatever fails to do this loses the existence which is proper to its nature. But you may argue that evil men are capable of action. I will not deny it, but such capability is the product of weakness, not of strength. For they can do evil acts, which they could not have done if they had been able to remain capable of good. And that possibility of doing evil shows clearly that they can do nothing. For if our earlier conclusion that evil is nothing still stands, it is clear that the wicked men can do nothing since they can only do evil. That is evident, I agreed. And, so that you may understand what the nature of this power is, let me remind you what we have already proved, that there is nothing more powerful than the supreme good. That is true. But, philosophy went on, the sovereign good cannot do evil. Certainly not. And does anyone think that men can do all things? No one in his right mind could think so. But men can do evil. Unfortunately, they can't. Therefore, since he can only do good and can do all things, and those who can do evil cannot do all things, it is obvious that those who can do evil are less powerful. Moreover, we have already shown that every kind of power is included among the things which men desire, and that all objects of human desire are related to the good as the goal of their natures. But the ability to commit crime is not related to the good, and so it is not desirable. And since every power should be desired, it follows that the power to do evil is not a power at all. For all this is clear that good men have power, but evil men are weak. Likewise, the truth of Plato's doctrine is evident. Only the wise can do what they want to do. The wicked can follow their desires, but they cannot accomplish what they want. For they do what they feel like doing, and they suppose that they will find among their pleasures the good that they are really looking for. But they are bound to fail, since shameful behavior does not bring happiness. Poem 2. Those high and mighty kings you see sitting high in glory, dressed in purple, surrounded by armed guards, can breathe cruel fury, threatened with fierce words. But if you strip off the coverings of vain honor from those proud men, you will see underneath the tight chains they wear. Lust rules their hearts with greedy poisons, rage whips them, vexing their minds to stormy wrath. Sometimes they are slaves to sorrow, sometimes to delusive hope. This is the picture of individual man with all his tyrant passions. Enslaved by these evil powers, he cannot do what he wishes. Prose 3. Do you see now the mire in which vice wallows, and the light in which probity shines? This shows clearly that the good are always rewarded and the wicked always punished. The aim or goal of an action may justly be said to be the reward of that action. As in a race, the prize a man competes for is said to be the reward. We have demonstrated that happiness is the good for which all things are done. Absolute good, therefore, is set up as a kind of common prize for all human activity. Now this prize is always achieved by good men, and further, no one who lacks the good may rightly be called a good man. Therefore, men of moral probity always achieve their reward. No matter how the wicked rave, the wise man never loses his prize, nor does it ever diminish. The wickedness of others does not deprive virtuous men of their glory. But if a man should find his happiness in a reward received from someone else, then either the one who gave it or some other person could give it away. But since a man's own probity confers this reward, he can lose the reward only by ceasing to be virtuous. Finally, since every reward is desired precisely because it is believed to be good, who can think that the one who possesses good is without his reward? And what a reward it is, the greatest and best of all, for recall the corollary I showed you before, and make this inference. Since the good is happiness, all good men are made happy by the very fact that they are good. And we have already shown that those who are happy are gods. Therefore, the reward of good men, which time cannot lessen, nor power diminish, nor the wickedness of any man tarnish, is to become gods. Since this is so, the wise man can be certain of the punishment of the wicked. For, since good and evil reward and punishment are opposites, the rewards of the good necessarily indicate the opposite, the punishment of the wicked. Therefore, just as virtue is the reward of virtuous men, so wickedness itself is the punishment of the wicked. Certainly, when a man is punished, he knows that he suffers evil. And if they think about their condition, can those who are not only tainted, but even infected by vice, the worst of all evils, consider themselves free from punishment? Consider the punishment which afflicts the evil as compared with the rewards of the good. You learned earlier that whatever is one, and that whatever is one is good. It follows then that whatever is must be good. And it follows from this that whatever loses its goodness ceases to be. Thus wicked men cease to be what they were, but the appearance of their human bodies, which they keep, shows that they were once men. To give oneself to evil, therefore, is to lose one's human nature. Just as virtue can raise a person above human nature, so vice lowers those whom it has seduced from the condition of men beneath human nature. For this reason, anyone whom you find transformed by vice cannot be counted a man. You will say that the man who is driven by avarice to seize what belongs to others is like the wolf. The restless, angry man who spends his life in quarrels you will compare to a dog. The treacherous conspirator who steals by fraud may be likened to a fox. The man who is ruled by the intemperate anger is thought to have the soul of a lion. The fearful and timid man who trembles without reason is like a deer. The lazy, stupid fellow is like an ass. The volatile, inconstant who continually changes directions is like a bird. The man who is sunk in foul lust is trapped in the pleasures of a filthy sow. In this way, anyone who abandons virtue ceases to be a man, since he cannot share in the divine nature and instead becomes a beast. Poem 3. Eurus, the east wind, caught the sails of Ulysses' wandering ships and drove them to the island where lived the fair goddess Circe, daughter of the sun. She mixed for her new guests a drink tainted by her magic, and by her skillful use of herbs she changed the sailors into different shapes. Some grew the faces of wild boars, others became African lions with sharp teeth and claws, some were turned into wolves. And when they tried to cry, they howled. Others wandered meekly about the house like Indian tigers. But in spite of so many misfortunes, Mercury, the winged god of Arcady, had mercy on Ulysses and saved him from the poison of the hostess. Nevertheless, his sailors greedily drank the evil cups. They were changed into swine and turned from food to husks and acorns. No part of them remained unchanged. They lost both voice and body. Only the mind remained to mourn the monstrous change they had suffered. But see how weak was the power of the goddess and her impotent herbs. She had the power over the bodies of men, but could not change their hearts. The strength of man is within, hidden in the remote tower of the heart. Poisons which can make him forget himself are more potent and deadly than Circe's because they corrupt the inner man. They do not harm the body, but they horribly wound the mind. When she had finished, I said, I see that you are right in saying that. Although vicious men keep the appearance of their human bodies, they are nevertheless changed into beasts as far as the character of their souls is concerned. Still, I wish that these cruel and wicked minds were not permitted to ruin good men. They are not permitted to do that, as I shall show you at a proper time. If, however, the power which they are thought to have were taken from them, their punishment would be greatly diminished. For though this may seem incredible to some, the wicked are necessarily more unhappy when they have their way than they would be if they could not do what they wanted to do. If it is bad to desire evil, it is worse to be able to accomplish it. For if it were not accomplished, the disordered will would be ineffectual. So when you see someone with the will and power to commit crime actually commit it, you know that he is necessarily the victim of a threefold misfortune. For each of those three things, the will, the power, and the act itself, contains its own punishment. I grant that, I answered, but I hope that they may quickly be relieved of this misfortune by losing their power to commit the crime. They will lose it sooner than you may wish, perhaps, and sooner than they think. For nothing happens so slowly in this brief span of life that the immortal spirit finds it long to wait for. The high hopes and well-played pots of the wicked are often quickly and unexpectedly destroyed, and this does indeed limit their mastery. If wickedness makes men miserable, the longer they are wicked, the more wretched they must be. And I would consider most unhappy those who did not finally find an end to their wickedness and death. If then we have found out the truth about the misery of wickedness, it is clear that unhappiness which lasts forever must be infinite. That is a strange and difficult conclusion, I said, but I recognize that it follows from that which I have already conceded to be true. You are right, philosophy answered, but anyone who finds it hard to accept a conclusion ought either to point out a false step in the argument or show that the series of propositions does not indicate a necessary conclusion. Otherwise, he must grant the inference if he has granted the premises. What I am now about to say may seem equally surprising, yet it follows with equal certainty from my argument. What is it, I asked? That the wicked are happier when they are punished than when they evade justice. I am not now suggesting the argument that might occur to anyone, that vicious men are corrected by punishment or led to reform by the fear of it, or that such punishment sets an example to others so that they will avoid involvement in the crime. In addition to the possibility of correcting and the power of example, there is still another way in which the wicked who avoid punishment can be shown to be more unhappy than those who are punished. What is that, I asked? We have shown, have we not, that the good are happy and the wicked unhappy? Yes. If then an unhappy man achieves some good, is he not happier than the man whose unhappiness is complete and unmixed with the slightest good? I should think so, I said. And if the misery of the man who has no good at all is increased by additional evils, isn't he much unhappier than the man who is relieved by acquiring some good? Yes, of course. Therefore the wicked receive some good when they are punished, because the punishment itself is good inasmuch as it is just. Conversely, when the wicked avoid punishment, they become more evil because you have already admitted that such impunity is evil because it is unjust. I cannot deny that. Therefore, the wicked who unjustly escape punishment are more unhappy than those who are justly punished. I agree that this follows from what has already been proved, but, I asked, do you leave no room for the punishment of souls after the death of the body? I do indeed, philosophy answered, and such punishments are severe. Some are imposed as bitter penalties, others as merciful purgation. But it is not now my intention to speak of these. So far I have tried to make you see that the power of evil men, which you find intolerable, does not exist, and that those same men whom you think go unpunished really never escape the penalties of their wickedness. Further, I have shown that the apparent impunity is short-lived, that the longer it goes on, the unhappier they become, and if it were eternal, they would be absolutely wretched. Finally, I have proved that wicked men who unjustly escape punishment are more miserable than those who are justly punished. And it follows from this that when they seem to escape chastisement, they are in reality undergoing more severe punishment. When I consider your argument, I said, I find that nothing could be more true. But if we consider the ordinary judgment of men, who is likely to find these ideas credible, or who will even listen to them? That is true, philosophy answered, because men cannot raise eyes accustomed to the darkness to the light of clear truth. They are like those birds who can see at night, but are blind in the daylight. For as long as they fix their attention on their own feelings rather than the true nature of things, they think that the license of passion and immunity from punishment brings happiness. But think of the sanctions of eternal law. If you conform your spirit to better things, you have no need of human approval and reward. You have placed yourself among the more excellent. But if you turn to what is cheap and low, do not expect someone else to punish you. You will have lowered yourself to a condition of squalor. It is as if you were to look by turns at the sordid earth and at the heavens, compelled by the power of sight, and nothing else, to be now in the dirt, now among the stars. Just because thoughtless men do not understand this, should we lower ourselves to those whom we have shown to be like beasts? If a man who had completely lost his sight should forget that he had ever been able to see, and be quite unaware of any natural disability, would we too think that this blind man could see? Most thoughtless people will not even grant another equally strong argument to the effect that those who injure others are more unhappy than those whom they injure. I would like to hear your explanation of that. Would you deny that every wicked man deserves to be punished? No. And is it absolutely clear that the wicked are unhappy? Yes. Then you agree that those who deserve punishment are miserable. That follows, I agreed. Then, if you were the judge, whom would you punish? The one who did the injury or the one who suffered it? Without hesitation, I would satisfy the injured party by punishing the one who hurt him. Then you must be convinced that the one who does the evil is more miserable than the one to whom the evil is done. That follows. From this, then, and for other reasons based on the principle that wickedness by its very nature makes men miserable, we see that an injury done to another causes unhappiness in the doer rather than in the recipient. But at present, lawyers take the opposite tact. They try to arouse sympathy in judges for those who have suffered grave injury when those who have harmed them are much more deserving of pity. Such criminals ought to be brought to justice by kind and compassionate accusers, as sick men are taken to the doctor, so that their disease of guilt might be cured by punishment. In this way, defense attorneys could be dispensed with, or if they wanted to help their clients, they would become accusers. And if the wicked themselves could somehow see the virtue they had abandoned and could be convinced that they could free themselves from the stain of vice and acquire virtue by undergoing punishment, they would ignore the pain, dismiss their lawyers, and give themselves up entirely to the accusers and the judges. In this way, wise men could abolish hatred, for no one but a fool would hate good men, and hating evil men would make no sense. Viciousness is a kind of disease of the soul, like illness in the body, and if sickness of the body is not something we hate, but rather regarded with sympathy, we have much more reason to pity those whose minds are afflicted with wickedness, a thing worse than any sickness. Poem 4. Why do you whip yourselves to frenzy and ever seek your fate by self-destruction? If you look for death, she stands nearby on her own accord. She does not restrain her swift horses. Those whom snakes, lions, tigers, bears, and boars are poised to kill raise their weapons against each other. Do men raise unjust quarrels and fierce wars because their lands and customs are different? Is this why they seek death from each other? Surely this is not just cause for such cruelty. If you would give every man what he deserves, then love the good and pity those who are evil.